Okay, so we're going to zero in on Karma Yoga and see if we can take its lessons and meld them with our psychological understanding and create out of that a practice for us that every one of us can use to use our therapy, our work, our relationships, our lives as a continuous learning process. So classically, there's a classic understanding of Karma Yoga that I'm just going to give you, because classically these yogas and meditations come out of a religious traditions. But one of the things that's happened is they've been introduced to the West, at least the Eastern ones, and to some extent the Western ones too, is that they've been stripped of their cultural trappings and secularized in useful ways, and it's very clear they can be very useful in their without their traditional context. So traditionally, Karma Yoga, it was classically described as having three elements. You would offer your work or your activity to God, a Brahman, and then you do the work as impeccably as possible. And here's the knife edge which makes Karma Yoga such a profound, growthful practice. You commit yourself to doing your work as impeccably as possible and simultaneously let go attachment to the outcome. So it's that two-edged sword. And that's tricky when you're working for a very idealistic goal. You're really wanting to help a client or you support this person in this emergency. It's really hard for all of us not to get attached to the outcome. And yet, as soon as we do, we're emotionally involved, we're less effective, it's our agenda, it's about us, etc. So our effectiveness, these traditions would say, is a function of how skillfully we're able to do these two things simultaneously. Really hold to our goal, our aspiration, our ideal, and simultaneously let go our attachment to how it turns out. So, now, this is the classic breakdown, but I found it very helpful to expand this and divide Karma Yoga into 10 steps. And what I want to do now is walk us through those steps, giving you the framework so you can have this, you'll understand the whole practice, and at the same time suggest you might want to do it in the moment here. Do each step in the moment here. Now, but it's doing these practices which transforms any activity into a continuous learning process that's multidimensional and multi-level. And I think that'll become apparent as we go through these 10 steps. So let's start with the first step, but I need to warn you, this is a very advanced practice. Almost everyone will have great trouble with this. So it's not easy, but it's very important. Stop. Before doing any major activity, undertaking something new, stop. We're used to running from one activity to another, and if we're going to transform our activities into learning, we need to take a moment, it can be just very brief, at the beginning of any activity, to just maybe take a couple of breaths, relax, let go, reflect on what we want to do, and then do it. So, for example, a great exercise to do is when you get in your car, before you turn the car on, just take 3 breaths. Now, I guarantee it won't be long before one of those times, about breath number 2, this thought will arise, I don't have time for this. Okay, so if you're really in a hurry, you don't have time for 3 breaths, take 6. You need them. Okay, so stop. Just take a moment, get in. So let me just suggest now, take a moment, relax, take a breath. Oh yes, breathe. Feels good. So now we're all here. Okay, second step. offer the activity. One of the goals of these kind of practices is to do them for a purpose larger than oneself. So traditionally one offered the activity to God, but you can, if you wish, it's really valuable to offer the activity to the service. For example, if you're just taking a breath before your patient comes in, take a breath. Okay, may this be for the benefit of this patient and for my learning so that I can be a more effective therapist in the future. So now it becomes something about more than just me. So the general principle is we're offering our activity to some transpersonal goal or context, something trans-egoic, and thereby reducing egocentricity and fostering larger perspectives. So, third step, set an intention. Really good general principle. There's a company I've heard of in New York, I haven't looked them up, called Start With Why. Why are we doing this? And it's a really great question, because the purpose we accord to any activity determines its meaning, its significance, and many aspects of its outcome. Now, to really get all the benefits of this, it's valuable to know something about the hierarchy of needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs doesn't have a lot of empirical support, but it keeps coming back and being revived and, and just has some very valuable principles within it. So a couple of important things to know. One is on that hierarchy of needs, you remember survival needs, physiological needs, security, belongingness, what's after belongingness, self-esteem, self-actualization. Okay, and then there are a couple we can add to that, but that'll do for now. General principle, if you choose a lower order motive, such as egocentric gratification or money or something, that's probably all you'll get. But if you choose a higher order motive, such as self-actualization, or what we'll probably want to stack on top of self-actualization later is selfless service. If you choose a higher order motive, such as self-actualization, and towards the end of his life, Maslow added self-transcendence to that hierarchy, then you usually also satisfy the lower order motives. I mean, you don't get to self-actualize if you starve. So, you have to handle the lower order motives to satisfy the higher order motives, but if you focus on the lower order motives, on the higher order motives, those usually encompass the lower order ones. And the more often we choose the higher order ones, the more satisfying and powerful they become, and the more they become the center of the so-called dominant motives of our lives. Now, what's really interesting is the same activity, exactly the same activity, can be done from any level on that hierarchy of needs. And one of the classic stories, which some of you heard, but we can take it a little further than the usual story is, of this village in a valley hearing these very curious sounds floating across the hills from a neighboring village. And even the village elders hadn't heard anything like this before. And after some days, they finally got one of the young men and sent him to climb the mountains and into the next valley and see what was going on. As he got to the top of the mountain, the young man could see a line of people working with big stones. And when he finally got close enough, he asked the first one, "Well, what are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm killing time till I get off." And the second one, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm earning a living." Okay, third person, still not really clear what's going on. Third person, what are you doing here? And third person said, "Well, I'm using my art. I'm a sculptor, and I'm carving these stones, and this is my art. This is what gives me satisfaction and fulfillment." Okay, the next person, "Oh, I'm working on this statue as part of this, and I'm building this church." And And the next person, well, I'm building this church for our family, our community, my children. It'll be here for my children, their children. I'm doing this as a gift to all the future generations in our village. And finally, coming up to the last person in the line, this old woman, asking, well, what are you doing here? A woman burst into laughter and said, me doing? This ego dissolved long ago. Life just flows through and creates this beautiful work. Now, the interesting thing is everyone's doing the same activity. But everyone's doing it from a totally different motive and getting a very different level of satisfaction and fostering and strengthening different motives in the process. So that's what's one of the beauties of these kind of practices, that we can choose our motive, and the higher order motives encompass all the lower ones.